Hello, party people, and welcome to the first episode of Season 4. Season 4, wow, I said it would not last, of Law Candor. For those of you who already know the show, those of you not familiar, Law Candor is the podcast wholly devoted to pursuing the legal technology revolution. I'm Bill Mariano. I'm here with my co-host, as always, Rob Hellewell. And again, welcome to the show. It is great to have you. To kick off this season, we're going to start with
Sightings of Radical Brilliance.
And as the name implies, this is the part of the show where we bring to you the latest news around the notable innovation and acts of sheer genius. We came across this article in Forbes by Mark Cohen, and it's called COVID-19 and the Reformation of Legal Culture. If you thought you were going to come to this podcast and not get your dose of COVID-19 information, you were wrong. It's everywhere. It permeates everything. We have to talk about it. How could we not? And this is an interesting article in terms of the effect of that COVID is going to have not only on the business of law, but also the culture of law and long after the cure to COVID actually comes.
Dude, I'm with you here, Bill. I mean, first of all, season 4, it just proves the critics are not always right. We're still here, and it's good times. Yeah, and I think there definitely is some genius in this, the sightings of radical brilliance. You know, and basically, like, how is COVID-19 forcing people, but also lawyers in general, to actually embrace technology? And I think we're seeing it, you know, in a lot of different ways. I think the easiest is, hey, there's a lot of people working from home now who weren't before. And if you kind of grew up in the law firm culture like we both did, you know, you were expected to, you know, be in the firm as much as possible and, you know, face-to-face interaction, and that's what mattered. And, you know, this is a huge shift for lawyers.
I had a partner once tell me billing time and face time consider two separate things. If we don't see you, we assume you're not working no matter what you bill at the end of the month. Look, I mean, he also touches on the opportunity here for the legal industry, right? And there's a line in it that I love. He says, is law's present its future? You know, the contours of after Corona industry have yet to be shaped, but there is a little doubt COVID-19's legacy will survive its cure. And I think that's true, right? There, we are starting to see this across all businesses, not just law firms, not just legal departments, but across all businesses. There are things that are happening now. They're going to have every business, including ours, revisit the work from office strategy. And he gets into how the technology actually offers a window into the culture shift as well. Like, for instance, you know, people would say, well, you know, coming to the office, you get to see each other, you get to spend that face time, you get to be with each other. But, you know, he takes the stance that, hey, with Zoom meetings now, Teams meetings, Skype meetings, that people are actually getting to see, you know, right now, Rob, I can see you in your office at home, right? You can see me in my office at home. Yesterday when we were interviewing somebody, you saw me in my backyard at home, and you see my dog who's driving me nuts run across and bark. And so we had to edit my dog out. I mean, these are things that actually, you know, that are happening now where you get to see a more, a personal view of your colleagues.
Yeah, I agree. Like there is like this different sense of intimacy when you actually, you know, are talking to someone in their house, and, you know, like whether it's their pets or their kids or the, you know, the landscapers outside, it just kind of makes things a little more human. And maybe that's a good cue for law firms that, you know, have often kind of been criticized for not being the most human of places. And I think it, you know, it goes beyond this. It's made me sort of question, like, you know, how often do you really have to get on an airplane and travel and be in front of someone versus, you know, a video conference where we're still looking at each other? I think that these are pretty fundamental changes, and I think that, you know, unlike, like, I would say, you know, in the Great Recession, you know, that was hard for law firms, but I don't know if there was really a lot of change, you know, in culture that came out of it. But this feels a little bit different. Like, you know, things are going to be different in the way we do business.
And law firms that use this as an opportunity to see what the future can bring, both from a technology perspective and a culture perspective, I think will survive this and actually thrive on the other side of it. So it's an interesting article. Mark Cohen, Forbes. Check it out.
Yep. Glad that I'm sure we'll talk more about that. But for now, let's cut over to our guest speaker for today's segment of the show. We're happy to have Ellen Blanchard of T-Mobile here to discuss emerging data sources and how to get the best handle on them.
Yeah, this was a good discussion. You guys are going to enjoy it. All right, so we are exciting. Oh, excuse me. I'll start over. All right, so we are exciting. Yeah, we are exciting. That's actually, you know what? I'm not going to start over. We are exciting. We are also excited for our next guest and on this topic. The topic is emerging data sources, getting a handle on eDiscovery for collaboration tools. And to help us through this in a very exciting way, in a way that we're very excited for, we have Ellen Blanchard from T-Mobile. Ellen, thank you for joining us. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for that introduction and for having me on today. I hope I live up to that exciting introduction.
Well, you have to, otherwise, that's it. We're never going to invite you back, and then we'll be shunned in the podcast society. No,
Oh, no.
we are really excited to have you. And as a matter of fact, can you take outside of your name and where you work? Can you give us a little background for our listeners today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I currently am head of discovery at T-Mobile. I've been there almost 5 years, which has flown by in a flash, really. And prior to that, I spent a couple years on the dark side at a tech partner of ours, and doing project management, SWAT team, sort of technology assisted review, dealing with emerging technologies at that point, which is different than those ones today. But I also, before that, spent about 15 years at a law firm doing securities and antitrust litigation, and got into this world because I think I was the youngest and most technically capable, and was handed literally a SCSI'd set of drives and that had documents on them, and told to figure out how to get them into Concordance and DocuLex. So that's where this all started.
You were also the person in your household that used to be able to program the clock on the VCR, I bet.
Yes,
I mean,
exactly.
listen, I know I'm dating myself, but yeah.
And make the little baseball guy run around the bases on the TRS-80.
Yes.
Right? Yes.
Well, and it's funny, like little did we know back in those days, when somebody handed you the drives and said, figure this out, that if you did a good job, that would alter the course of your life, not just at the law firm, but maybe for many years after. At least that was my experience. But
yeah, absolutely. Well, I love sitting in this kind of intersection between technology and the law, and being able to try to translate, although certainly those programming days are completely different than the way it is now, but definitely, enjoy that part of it.
Well, speaking of that, one thing we like to do on the podcast is, take an issue kind of at the 30,000 foot level first. And, when we're talking about collaboration tools, what are just some kind of, I guess, the trends that you've seen in the last couple of years? And then, of course, with COVID-19.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think over the last few years, there's been so many technologies that have come out, I think, and they're just getting a lot easier to collaborate online instead of having to be in a conference room and using a whiteboard and things like that. So we're seeing that. We're also seeing that the government agencies have caught on to this, and they are asking for documents in collaboration tools, Slack, Teams, and also messaging applications and things like that as well. And all of that is absolutely ramped up in the last few months. With everybody working remotely, there isn't the opportunity to go into a conference room in those kind of brainstorming sessions. So these collaboration tools have really kind of taken on a heightened level of importance.
With this sort of rapid growth in the market of these collaboration tools, how do you get a handle? I mean, every day there's a new one coming out. I mean, I know on our side, we're getting questions every day from clients saying, hey, can you handle this type of data? Can you handle that? When you have to put governance around it, it's got to be maddening.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think one of the key pieces is getting ahead of it as much as you can, and thinking about it not so much as what are we going to do for Teams? What are we going to do for Slack? But what are we going to do for collaboration tools in general, and helping our employees understand which ones can be used, which ones can't be used or shouldn't be used. And thinking about that way, I think having an IT spouse, if you will, to really, kind of have somebody who's hearing about them maybe ahead of legal, and to, so that they can give you a heads up so you can put a plan in place.
Yeah, for sure. Like I think one of the big issues in this space is, you have collaboration tools that appeal to certain audiences, whether it's, engineering or, marketing. On the other hand, you have legal that would prefer that everyone just used one standardized system that, was really, synced well with eDiscovery. When you're kind of weighing that balance between, tools that people like and that make them more productive versus managing risk, how do you do that?
Yeah, well, I think one of the big things is talking to the employees and what it is their needs are. Because the reality is, if you ignore that and ignore the fact that they need these for their job, they're going to go find something that does work for them. And not because they're doing anything nefarious, but just because they want to do a good job and they want the tools that let them do that. And so it might not be that one tool fits all for every single business unit, but the reality is that you can probably get to a handful of them, right? And sort of help the employees understand what the risks are. I mean, they may not recognize that if they choose this particular tool, there are security risks around it. I mean, Slack is a good example, and we use it, but the sort of general version of Slack that came out, there was very few security guidelines around it, especially many companies were using the same instance of Slack. Their data was commingled on the back end and things like that. Moving to enterprise grid is really important for a lot of corporations because there's a significant additional security provisions in place. You have a lot more, ability to control what's in there and things like that. And so, understanding those little things and making sure that legal is part of that discussion, has a seat at the table, is really important.
So it's interesting, even with that example, it just got me thinking, how often do you have to go back and revisit policies after a technology's been in play for a while, or understand that if, the paid version, the enterprise version might relieve some of your concerns, or, how often do you have to just go back and revisit policies as these technologies evolve?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. I mean, the challenge with policies, especially in a large corporation, is that change process is very slow. So a lot of that is trying to anticipate and be proactive about, and again, think about these in terms of the categories of, it's okay to use collaboration tools, but it's not okay to use ephemeral messaging or those types of things, so that you can capture a lot in there. But it absolutely is, I mean, the same way, if it's a new technology coming on board, having that IT spouse to say, hey, Slack's changed their policies, or, there's now different settings we can apply, coming back to legal and saying, does this help? Does this, kind of solve your solutions? And I think I'll say too, just helping IT understand what your concerns are so that they can be alert as they're hearing about changes, because they're probably on the front lines of getting those emails saying, oh, we've got this great update, and what does that mean? And that way they're sort of plugged into what your needs are.
Yeah, it's funny, when people are, looking at these different tools and trying to figure out, what's going to work best for them. There's probably only 1% of the world that is thinking something different, and that's, how do I manage eDiscovery around this tool? And just curious, of what advice you have for people that are kind of wrestling with that, or, tips that you've learned that can help them.
Yeah, absolutely. And this has been true not just in these new technologies, but all along. Things like, databases were set up for the business to use them, and they don't have a magic eDiscovery button. I keep asking them to put that in there, but that hasn't worked yet. And so, helping even just the parties we're producing to understand the back ends of the database or the tools and stuff. But I think sort of on these particular emerging technologies, it's a matter of helping the employees kind of understand what those risks are, what things that they need to think about in terms of what those downstream impact is on those tools, and really being proactive. Because I think what often happens, especially in the government investigation context, is you get a request and they want information so quickly that you may not have a lot of time to come up with like the perfect solution, but you can, a lot of times working with your tech partners, come up with a solution that will work. So thinking through, what it is do I really need in this context.
Yeah, whenever we ask about the magic eDiscovery button, they always tell us it's on the product roadmap.
For 2030, is that?
This is where Rob and I differ. I actually always promise my clients that we have the magic eDiscovery button. Then I stop answering my phone after they sign on, but it works. It really works. I mean, they never work with me again for those that I use, but for the one, I get them signed up quite a bit. It's an attractive offer.
Right. Well, and if your success rate is based on the number of new customers, then that's great, right?
Yeah. Well, the only problem is I have to try to find a different company to work for every 30 days. They just keep me on here Lighthouse to do the podcast, but they've fired me long ago just for promising magic eDiscovery buttons. I'm gonna do my best at recapping some of the high points. The government agencies are starting to take notice of these different collaboration tools, and so you're starting to see more and more requests around it. Just a matter of time before you start getting the same requests from a plaintiff in a litigation, right? So Slack, Teams, messaging apps, things like that. The advice being, try to get it as ahead of it as possible. Try to get an idea of what can be used, what can't be used. Maybe the biggest, the most important thing I saw coming out of this was getting an IT spouse. which might be, it's like that work wife kind of thing in the IT department that, to bring it back to reality programming, 90-Day Fiance,
There we go.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, I got sucked into that for a season. By the way, if you get a chance, don't. Married at First Sight's another one. My wife got sucked into that. She told me, if you get a chance, don't. So we try to stay away from those. But I think it's a great piece of advice, right? Get somebody in IT that you can really have a heart to heart with and explain to them what your concerns are from a legal perspective, and see if they can help to find some way of bridging the gap with the tools that they want to employ or that other departments want to employ. Don't have a policy for each tool, but rather for a category of tools. Otherwise, I think you'll drive yourself insane as each tool gets released. In terms of how to decide what technologies to allow, talk to your employees, explain the risks, and try to drive down to a handful. And talk to IT about and the people in the various departments about your concerns from a legal perspective, and be proactive as possible, because oftentimes when you're asked for data, you're asked to respond to some sort of a subpoena or some sort of a request. It's happening very, very quickly. If you don't have a plan in place, you're going to be, blank out of luck.
I was going to say the only problem with finding an IT work spouse is that in their mind, they're the bachelor.
That's true. That's true.
Well, and they don't want to talk to legal for some reason. I don't understand that, but
you know what? If an organization was a lunchroom, IT and legal would not sit at the same lunch table, right? Definitely not. But if you could find that one IT person that you can go have a carton of milk with in the corner during every lunch period, that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, or sit on the stairs outside of
sit on the stairs. Yes, I was a big stairs sitter. I did some of my best work sitting on stairs with friends. Yeah. Especially the friends that I didn't want other people to know I was friends with. I
think that's a whole nother podcast topic there.
Yeah. I only had like 6 friends in high school. If you want to get into that now, I can lay back on the couch a little bit and start to get into it. I don't know if you want to try to be my shrink, you might, my last shrink quit and got into law. So do think of that what you will. Listen, this has been absolutely great, Ellen. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for putting up with me, and especially for putting up with Rob. And,
really, it's a struggle. Thank you, Ellen.
You were fantastic, and I really, really appreciate you joining me.
No, thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.